Two bodies, two funerals. A father and son carried on the shoulders of mourners, each body wrapped in a cloth shroud, lying in a simple casket. 44-year-old Syrian refugee Khalid Mustafa and his 15-year-old son Hamza, the first of 50 brutally murdered to be buried. In the wheelchair, Khalid's other son, 13-year-old Zaid, injured in the Al Noor Mosque shootings, but out of hospital today. He may have escaped death, but surely unable to escape the enduring agony.
But the sheer fact that today we laid a father and a son to rest. We left behind a wife and another son. This is the day where our heart is soft.
I felt very devastated. I was emotionally very disturbed. Seeing the body was lying down, it was very emotional time for me, and it was very hard.
Khalid and his family had been in the country just 9 months. A farrier, he was busy learning English. His sons were at Kashmir High.
Yesterday, I might have been walking through the hallways in school with him. I might have been playing sports with him, and just to be so overwhelmed that, lives were lost.
So many mourners were in attendance, they were urged to use just their hands to fill in the graves.
Be strong, look inside amongst us and amongst our brothers. Muster that strength that we need to carry on.
The families waited 5 days for this funeral. Muslim custom is for the dead to be buried within 24 hours. Officials have been fending off criticism from the Muslim community for delays in releasing the bodies.
Our number one priority is the victims and their families, but we do, of course, have other obligations. And the first one, on behalf of the Chief Coroner and all of the coroners, is to ensure absolute accuracy in that identification process.
One News understands the coroner has been reluctant to use family members to visually identify the dead.
I have had an update that we have had 30 victims now approved for release to be reunited with their families. But I know the process has been incredibly difficult and frustratingly slow from the perspective of family members, but on the side I've seen those who are working on this process as well, and I can also acknowledge that they are working incredibly hard too.
For Muslims, the process of burial is to send their loved ones to paradise. At least for now, that journey is underway.
And Paul is with us now. Paul, more burials happening right now, and also a bit more certainty for those families still waiting for their loved ones.
Indeed, Simon. Look, the second wave of burials has just got underway in the past hour. Look, I've just spoken to a council representative who's told me that the scheduling of future burials is incredibly fluid. But we understand the first wave of burials will be for families who would prefer a private farewell. Most likely group burials will begin from tomorrow onwards. Now, look, the Prime Minister said this afternoon that 30 bodies had been released back to their families. The Police Commissioner said earlier today that he hoped that the majority of the 50 dead would be back with their families later tonight, Simon.
So many to come, Paul, but you were there as the first burial took place.
I was, Simon, and in fact from this vantage point where I'm at, just across the road from the cemetery there, as you can see behind me, look, there were about 100 media stretched around about 150 metre front across from the cemetery, and look, everyone was doing their live crosses into their bulletins all around the world. But the moment the bodies appeared and were carried on the shoulders of those men, you could hear a pin drop. Look, it was like watching TV with the sound off, and a number of journalists, a number of media broke down in tears, and there was a lot of consoling and arms around those people. And I think you can't overstate the profound effect that this tragedy is having on all those involved.